Thank you, Rupert. I really resonated with what you said earlier about it's not transcendent but immanent.
Both transcendent
It's both,
and immanent.
yeah.
Not just transcendent, but also immanent.
And I feel like in probably all my spiritual journey, I've been on the sort of transcendent path, and I'd like to know how you transition it to the seeing everything as yourself, because I feel like the transcendent stage can be very bleak and not much fun, and I know that the happiness and peace and joy is imminent, but I'm not feeling it. And I feel like, is it because I'm not established in the awareness enough? And is that all that I'm doing wrong?
Yes, if we've been exclusively on the inward-facing path, the path of transcendence, the recognition that I am the witnessing presence of consciousness that is aware of these objects, but is at a distance from them, impartial.
Yeah.
Then through that method we tend to access the peace of our true nature, the independence of consciousness, the imperturbability of consciousness, but the happiness aspect of consciousness seems to elude us still.
And the love.
And the love aspect, yes. That's something that we tend to begin to feel more as we go back to the objects of experience. So how do you begin to affect this collapse, having established the distinction between awareness and objects, and the transcendent nature of awareness, the independent nature of awareness? How do we then collapse this distance? The 3 steps I usually give, which I mentioned yesterday. The first step, I am that to which my experience appears. This is the Vedantic approach. I am the witnessing presence of consciousness to which experience appears and with which experience is known. And then in the second step, we begin to come closer. We realize I am not just that to which experience appears, but I am that in which all experience appears. And this step begins to collapse the distinction, because everything that I am experiencing, including all my experience of the world and others, is taking place in myself, in consciousness. And just as, relatively speaking, there is no distance between any object and the physical space in which it appears, so in experience there is no distance between any thought, feeling, sensation or perception and the knowing space in which it appears. So already we begin to feel this intimacy. Nothing is outside of ourselves. Nothing that is, we are no longer at an aloof distance as simply the witness of experience. We are the witness of experience, but we are the witness and that in which all experience arises. So we begin to feel that everything arises in myself. And then as we explore our relationship between ourself and the objects more closely, we realize that everything that appears in awareness is made of awareness, because there is nothing in awareness other than awareness, out of which any experience could be made. Another way of saying that is, all there is to experience is the knowing of it. Knowing is the only substance that is ever experienced. So in knowing there is no knower and known. The knower and the known are abstractions. All that is actually present is knowing or experiencing, pure experiencing, with no experiencer and no thing that is experienced.
Mm-hmm.
There is just experiencing, just knowing. And that is the common, the way we feel this at a human level is through the experiences of love and beauty. The experience of love is the absence of separation
Mm-hmm.
between myself and an other. And the experience of beauty is the absence of separation between myself and an object. They are the same experiences in relation to either a person and an animal or an object.
Mm-hmm.
But these two experiences, the experiences of love and beauty, are the collapse of the apparent distinction or separation between the knower and the known, leaving only pure knowing. So when this begins to become clear, we no longer need to separate ourselves, distance ourselves from any experience or any person. We no longer need to put our thoughts at a distance. I am the witness of that thought. It cannot touch me, it cannot hurt me. That's true. The thought cannot touch you. Nothing that appears in the space of awareness can hurt the space of awareness. But we no longer have to separate ourselves from anyone or anything in order to access this impartiality, this peace. We begin to feel that the presence of awareness pervades our experience, that everything we experience, however pleasant or unpleasant, is made of the stuff of ourself, and therefore we no longer need to resist experience. That means we no longer need to resist people. We feel more open, less defended. And surprise to surprise, our relationships become more loving. The love aspect begins to be felt. We no longer need to defend ourselves against the world because we're not maintaining the witnessing presence of consciousness in its aloof ivory tower. Wherever we are in experience, we are the knowing of it. And nothing can harm that knowing, not because it is locked up in an ivory tower, separate and aloof, but because it is transparent, it is empty. It's like empty space. It cannot be hurt by experience and therefore doesn't need to defend itself against experience. So we find ourselves more at ease in the world, more open in relationship, less defended. Well, the common name for that is love and happiness.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
I am struggling with two things, and I would love some guidance because I would like not to get too far off trail. And the first is if we could take just a step back to the idea or the reality that all objects occur in awareness or in our experience. And in some of the guided meditations, when I've tried to do that when I've tried to understand or perceive that just with sensory perception, it's very hard, and I get very contracted. When I do that with conceiving, like I can conceive of this room, and then I understand that everything exists within that conceiving, then it's very effortless and it makes sense to me. And I guess the question is that the right path?
I don't think you're using words.
Okay.
When you talk about conceiving, I don't think you use it in the same way that I do. So when you say, when you conceive of this room...
When I think of it, when I imagine it. Or
so when you think of this room,
yes.
The thought that the room
yes.
exists simply as a thought.
Yes.
And a thought obviously appears in consciousness.
Okay.
Yeah. Now,
okay.
when you close your eyes and you imagine this room, or
yeah.
you remember this room, that is an image. Yes.
Right.
All images, obviously, even from a conventional point of view, all images appear in consciousness.
Right.
Take the image of your kitchen. Now.
Right.
for instance? Where does that image appear?
Right, absolutely, in
Obviously,
my consciousness.
in consciousness.
Yeah.
But what is not so obvious is that our experience of this room is, first of all, a perception. Would you agree with that? That this is a perception?
Yes.
You're having a perception?
Yes.
Now, where do perceptions appear?
Yeah, perceptions also appear in my consciousness, but it's a little, but the thoughts are so. Well, let me just ask it differently. When I'm focusing on perception, I feel kind of like I'm in my own head, and I'm trying to recognize that those objects are right in here. When I'm focusing on, there's another way that I can do this, which is kind of expanding my awareness. And in that way, it's very easy to understand or to feel objects as existing in it. It's like my awareness gets very, very large.
That's the way to go.
Okay, good.
That's the way to go.
Good. It's the easier way.
Yeah, go exactly.
Good.
If it works,
do it.
Do it.
Okay. Okay. So I'm hoping that's the answer for the next question too, because it's also about what's easy and what's harder. I've been aware, and I have noticed this the last couple of mornings, that just sitting in your expansive presence, it is very, very easy for me to feel that unbounded nature. And that makes me very happy. And it's what I want to do. And I notice that when I try to follow the instructions as part of the meditation, there's a great sorrow that arises. It's almost like I'm having to focus so much and make something happen. And what I really want to do is just sit in that kind of unbounded awareness.
Yes. Yes, again, that's the way to go. Okay. When you talk about, in the meditation, you're focusing on something and trying to make that happen. That's why in the meditations I'm careful. That this morning we spent almost the first hour simply being knowingly this openness. I don't remember, but I think that was how we started, and that was really the essence of it. Be knowingly this openness. Don't contract onto, don't focus on any object, don't perseverate or try to make something. Be this space, and then we start at a certain stage, we allow the sensation of the body to come, so to speak, into the middle of this openness, and we begin to explore it. But we never collapse onto it or focus on it. We were always breathing the space into the sensation. You must remain this global space.
And so is it if what I am drawn to do is not follow the directed experience, but sit in that kind of unbounded awareness that arises easily here, is that
yes.
enough?
No, it's not enough.
Okay.
In almost all cases, it's not enough, because the sense of me in the body is a tight knot. It's a contraction in the body, and it's like when you put a dirty dishcloth, tea cloth, in a bath of warm soapy water to wash it. You can soak it in the warm water, and that will dissolve 80% of the dirt out of it. But some of the deeper stains survive this soaking in hot water. They need to be. You need to agitate the cloth a bit. You need to. So, just soaking in the presence of awareness is the 80%. Much of the agitation of the separate self will settle down, or the agitation of the mind will settle down in this soaking. But some of the deeper knots, the core knots of the separate self, are impervious to this soaking. And in most cases, they need something a little more proactive.
Mm-hmm.
What we were doing this morning in the first half was just soaking, just being knowingly, the openness, being lovingly, being knowingly the sensitivity with which all experience is known. It was a passive meditation. But then at a certain stage we started, our attention was drawn to the experience of the body, the current sensation. And then we began to explore it in a bit more of an active way, and we actually started breathing this emptiness into it. And the first thing, for some people it's very easy, but for others the first thing that does is provoke resistance. And that's very, very good. That's a sign the meditation is working. It's not a sign that we are failing, because that resistance is the core of the separate self. And the first thing that this exercise has done is to expose this core resistance. And then we breathe this openness, this loving openness, into this knot, and slowly, slowly, slowly it opens up. So I would suggest in time, when you feel ready for it. So if you just at the moment, all you want to do is abide as this open, empty, loving space, and you don't want to take a step further than that, you don't want to be more proactive, that's fine. In which case you could listen to my voice just like you listen to the teenagers chatting out here. In other words, you don't really listen to them. It's like wallpaper. Mm-hmm. It's just background noise. It's just noise. You don't listen to the meaning of it. Mm-hmm. But at a certain stage, you may, when you feel that you want to, the mm-hmm. core knot of me in the body is still dense, then start to explore your experience in the way that we did this morning.
Okay. So it's resistance, even though how it's manifesting is kind of this thirst for that deep abiding.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, it sounds like that knot is resistance.
Yes. In the end, that knot will demand attention. Okay. Yeah. It may be for a while.
Okay.
Here, maybe you come to a few retreats, it'll be fine. Mm-hmm. This knot will be in abeyance and you'll be able to just abide as the presence. But sooner or later in your life it will demand attention.
Like really I am inside the door that I was knocking on.
Yes, you were thinking that you had to go through this knot of thoughts and feelings in order to have access to yourself. But are there two yous in you? One you on the other side of thoughts and feelings, and one you on this side that you have to travel to? No, you are one person. You are one. I doesn't have to travel to I. You don't have to travel to yourself. You are yourself. Do you not know the simple feeling of being?
I know.
That feeling of being is yourself. It just the simple feeling of being, which we express when we say, I am. That phrase expresses the knowledge of our being, the feeling of being, the experience of being. And normally we don't see that being, we don't feel ourselves as that being clearly, because it has become mixed with thoughts and feelings. So you don't have to do anything to the thoughts and feelings. The thoughts and feelings are an apparent limitation of our being, and this mixture of our essential being plus thoughts and feelings makes for the limited being called the separate self or ego. But the thoughts and feelings are just a watercolor wash over our being. They're just a temporary coloring of our being. The thoughts and feelings are continually appearing and disappearing, but Our essential being always remains.
So, when you said this morning, don't let anything in the current crystallize. So there is a not letting.
Well, that was a slightly different. That was a different investigation, because now we are in this conversation we've been having. We've been turning away from our thoughts and feelings and sensations and perceptions, and just focusing on what we essentially are. So this conversation that you and I have been having for 10 minutes is part of the inward-facing path, the turning away from objective experience. What we were doing this morning was the opposite of that. It was the Tantric path. It was going towards sensations, particularly sensations, towards the experience of the body. And then at the end, we included all of experience. But we no longer, at that stage, we no longer see experience as a collection of objects appearing either to awareness or even in awareness. The objects are not like, thoughts, feelings, sensations and perceptions are not like fishes in the ocean. You can pluck a fish out of the ocean. It's a discrete object, a well-defined object that you can separate. Well, at one stage of the teaching, it's legitimate to talk about objects appearing in awareness. But we were way beyond that today. So what I was saying was that thoughts and feelings and sensations and perceptions are not really like fishes in the ocean. They're more like currents in the ocean. Just temporary limitations, temporary vibrations or movements of the water itself. You cannot pluck a current out of the ocean. The ocean is just, the current is just a movement or pulsation of the water. So what I was saying was, don't let the current crystallize into a fish. You don't really experience something called a thought. You experience a process of thinking. And all there is to thinking is the knowing of it. So think, what we call a thought is a temporary modulation, a temporary vibration, a pulsation of knowing. Like the current is a temporary movement of the water. There's no object there called a thought or a feeling or a world or a body. When we talk about a thought or a body or a world, we are reifying or objectifying consciousness, making our experience imagining that our experience consists of a multiplicity and diversity of discrete objects known by a separate self. That's not actually our experience. But when I said don't let an object or a self crystallize out of this knowing, it could also apply to the self. Don't let your self as a separate self crystallize out of consciousness. You are consciousness, and consciousness is not an entity. Don't allow what you essentially are, pure consciousness, to crystallize into a self. It's not. It's a field of knowing. It's a dimensionless field of knowing. It's not located somewhere. It doesn't have a size or a shape or a gender. And that's what I meant when I said don't let a self crystallize out of this field of knowing that is pure consciousness, which is our essential identity. And that essential identity shines in each of our experience as the knowledge I am. That knowledge, the feeling of being, is consciousness shining in our experience. All that's necessary is to keep your essential being sacred. Keep it free of any kind of limitation. Don't let it be limited by thoughts and feelings and sensations. Keep it sacred. Keep it free. And it's beautiful that you saw that in your mother as she was dying, as everything was falling away from her, and that you felt in her that as everything fell away from her, that which can never fall away from her, that which she essentially is. You saw it shining through all of that. That's beautiful, because you know now that your mother, what your mother essentially was, not how she appeared to you at all different stages in your life, but how she essentially was this unlimited being, which is the same as your unlimited being. So now you know where to find your mother. In your heart, in yourself, as yourself. She was always that. She appeared temporarily outside of you as a mother, and now she's just gone back to where she always really was, your very own being. You can always find her there. What is most important for all of us, whether we are interested in these more these matters or not, is to have access to the deep peace that you describe. That's the most important thing for all of us, irrespective of the type of mind we might have. So that's very good that you have access to that place. So you just need now to have pathways that you can take, that take you back there, and to rest regularly there. And then as your mind rises again, it comes back saturated with the peace of your true nature. That's really all that's important. The answer to the question, who am I, is this deep peace that you refer to. So although the question, who am I, is a question that is formulated by the intellect, the question is not answered by the intellect. The question is answered by the experience which you described very well. So yes, so the mind asks the question, who am I? The mind travels back through layers of its own experience, but it is consciousness that has the recognition, I am pure consciousness. And the experience of deep peace that you described is that experience, I am pure consciousness. Okay. So that experience is the experiential answer to the question, who am I? It's when you're not in deep peace, in other words, when you're suffering, then you have to ask the question. And that's when you need, when you're suffering, that's when you need these pathways. Whether the pathway is initiated by the question, who am I? Or am I aware? Or what is the essential element of myself? Or what is the continuous element in all experience? Any of these questions initiate the process of self-inquiry, whose resolution is the peace that you describe.